I'm so glad all of you could be here with us tonight. This is just one session of a new Jewish Holidays and Traditions 101 programming we have planned here at HaMaqom. Our next session is next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Pacific time, and it's all about a holiday called Basisa. And I've got to tell you, that's a new one to me. I will be there, or I'll be here, and I will be paying attention because this is really exciting to have a new holiday to learn about. It's not new to Libyan and Tunisian Jews, but it's new to this American Reform Jew. Jewish Holidays and Traditions 101 is going to continue throughout the year for free, thanks to our generous HaMaqom donors. We hope you can continue to join us and take advantage of this wonderful programming. We'll make sure to keep you informed about future 101 events. Check the Jewish Holidays and Traditions 101 webpage, listed under our events tab on hmqm.org for the calendar of events and recaps on any sessions you may have missed. If you're thinking, oh, I meant to go to the such and such program, there are recordings of at least some of the programs, of the good bits, and maybe some of the exciting bits where things went sideways, who knows. But we're very glad to have you with us. Now, I am supposed to explain Passover in 20 minutes. This is one of the challenges of a rabbinic career because we love to just talk and talk and talk. What I'm going to try to do is talk about the heart of Passover, talk about what Passover is really about. And I want you to imagine, maybe not a long time ago, maybe right now, this is a unique year. In fact, we don't need to imagine. We have been trapped in our houses and trapped in these little boxes on the Zoom screen for a year. Our ancestors were trapped in a narrow place called Egypt or Mitzrayim for 400 years. And they finally went so crazy with it, they were screaming and crying to heaven. And God heard them and said, this has got to change. And Passover is when we recount the story of how it changed and how we changed from being a crowd of unhappy slaves to being a people, a real nation with a real history and a magnificent future that none of those slaves could have begun to imagine. So now here we are in our little Zoom boxes, and we're going to bust out of those Zoom boxes and go wild, except we've still got COVID out there. We've still got Pharaoh to deal with. And that's really sad. It's really sad that we're oppressed by this virus, although we've also already had miracles. We have the miracles of not one, not two, but three vaccines that are becoming available. So we've had horrible grief. Many of us have lost family and friends to this disease, but we have hope, and we are going to get out of this Egypt. Now, one of the things that we are told about Passover is that the point of the whole exercise is by the time we get out to the other side of it, we will have felt as if we personally had experienced this story. It's not just a story we learn, it's a story we live. And first we live it, if you're living in a traditional household, by cleaning out all the crumbs in your house, which can be quite a project after a year of eating crackers and watching reruns. We've been stuck in these narrow places. And now we're going to clean up, we're going to pack up, and we're going to get ready to go. And all of that sounds like we're really well organized and we know exactly what we're doing. And the truth of the matter is, the Hebrews in Egypt didn't know anything except that Moses' Hebrew was very bad, and he really had a gift for annoying Pharaoh. So It was a scary time. It was a scary time, very much like our own scary time now. But we have all of our traditions to carry us through this time, this moment in history that we're living in, and the moment of history we're calling up behind us. One of the ways that we remember the narrative is with something called the Passover Seder. The Passover Seder is a meal that we eat together, but it's not just, for once, it's not just about the food. It's about the story. Because you see, in ancient times, when we still had the temple, we didn't need the Seder. We followed the directions in Leviticus. We would take, the head of household would take a struggling goat. This is terrible. A warning for anybody who loves little goats. I'm about to tell you something awful. They would take the little goat down, and the goat would get shechted. It would get butchered. And then the priests would take the part that goes to the temple, and they would start to roast the first part of the goat and hand it back to the householder, who would then walk up the hill to one of the hills around Jerusalem where his family was camped, or her family was camped, and they would roast the goat and eat greens, and they would tell the story. The parents would tell the children, the grandparents would tell the children, newcomers would hear the story, and they would hear the story of what had happened in Egypt so long before. But once we had the temple, we couldn't do that. So we had to come up with something new. And the rabbis then, just like rabbis now or educators now in an educational institution, said, what is the best technology for learning that's available? And the best technology for learning was the Greek symposium banquet. It was a meal at which philosophers would drape themselves on couches, and they would eat lovely food and drink lots of wine and talk about sophisticated topics. And they said, you know, those Greeks are really smart. They almost did us in a couple of centuries ago. We'll use this technology, but we're going to change it up a little because you see there was a problem. The symposium banquet ended with something called the Afikomen. And the Afikomen is where we get the Roman orgy. It was dancing girls and wild stuff and naughty things. And the rabbis were not going there. So they said, we're going to redo the Afikomen. We're going to have a little broken piece of matzah, and we're going to call it the Afikomen, and it's the last thing you eat, so that the taste of matzah is on your lips when you finish the meal. Very different than a Roman orgy. So they fixed up the symposium banquet and began having seders. This is sometime probably in the 2nd century of the Common Era. And this is where we get the Passover Seder. Now, over time, because once you write something down, it becomes frozen. It ossifies to a certain extent. But we also like having scripts. We don't want to forget anything. I love to have lists. If you could see my desk here, it is covered with steno notebooks. Steno notebooks, oh, that doesn't show against the background. Steno notebooks full of notes, and they're cascading onto the floor because I've got all these different projects going. Instead of having a steno notebook, somebody said, let's have a Passover Haggadah. And the way I like to think about the Haggadah, this is a pretty standard, oh dear, Passover Haggadah. And I'm not going to try holding things up anymore. That's not going to work. But the Haggadah is like a script. However, you can follow it like a movie script and follow it line by line and be very strict. You know, some movie makers like Stanley Kubrick, you don't change a line. Actors weren't allowed to mess with the script at all. And then there were directors like Robert Altman who would just turn it into, the script was really just a set of suggestions about where the improv was going to go. And we can do that with a Passover Haggadah. We can say, okay, we know more or less what's going to happen, and we'll kind of follow this thing if we get lost or run out of gas. But let's do our favorite parts, and let's do any parts that just seem too weird to skip, and it will all be okay. If what you've got at the Seder table is a bunch of very young children, you don't want to sit there and read about B'nai Brak and old rabbis staying up all night. On the other hand, if you've got teenagers, you can tell them the little secret that those rabbis who are up all night studying are actually planning a bloody revolution. Unfortunately, the revolution didn't work out so well, so we don't talk about it so much. But there are all kinds of things to tell and all kinds of possibilities. I know families who dress up for the Passover Seder because it puts them in the mood. They feel like, oh, I know how it feels. I'm standing here in a burlap bag, and my ancestor wore a burlap bag out of Egypt, and I'm united with them. There are families that pack suitcases and sit on their suitcases for Passover Seders. And then there's some families who get together. They will tell the story in their own way, but it's not as dramatic a thing. You will know what your household needs to do. We've got a Passover 101 handout that you should have received with your welcome message in the email that you received. And there's a lot of stuff in there. There's also a handout, a link to an essay that I wrote for the overwhelmed, because sometimes we hear about Passover cleaning. I had a teacher who came in one day in rabbinical school, and her hair looked like Bozo the Clown. This is the dean of the rabbinical school at Hebrew Union College, and she looks like a clown. It was terrible. But she'd been vacuuming inside her children's shoes in the closet. This woman was serious about cleaning up the chametz, the crumbs, before Passover. And that may be your family's tradition, and more power to you. But if you're hearing stories like that and going, oh my God, I can't do Passover, that's okay. I have an article for you, and it's on that sheet, and you just click on it, and I guarantee you're going to feel better. There's also a link to something I call the Movie Seder. And the Movie Seder is for a year when you are so overwhelmed that you can manage to open a box of matzah and click on the TV. And that's all you can handle. And I promise you, it will cover the subject for you. Okay? Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not looking forward in a year past COVID to having a beautiful long meal with all kinds of stuff that is going to visit me for weeks, and desserts and brisket and matzo ball soup and all the wonderful stuff. I'm looking forward to that too. But what I just want to impress on you is that sometimes in the Jewish community, we get going and we say, oh, if you can't do it all, don't bother. If you can't do the best one, don't bother. Sometimes the best one is the simplest one. So don't let that overwhelm you. Now, for the following week, then we have an outburst of Jewish creativity. And the way that works is that if you are observant, you continue substituting matzah for regular bread for a whole week. And that has resulted in creations like matzah pizza and matzah tuna fish sandwiches and all kinds of other amazing things that people manage to do with unleavened bread. This is one of the things to me that lets me know that the Jewish people are both resilient and very, very clever, because we manage to take this stuff that is beloved of some and like bad crackers to others, and we can turn it into wonderful food. So that's my story about Passover. I'd like to open this up, but first what I'd like to do is invite you to use the chat box. It's over here on the side. If you can You click a little talky thing that says chat at the bottom of your screen, and you can use it. And I want to ask you to think about something. Imagine that in your house right now, you got word that we were all going to get up and head out to someplace behind Moses, and we've got to do it tonight. We've eaten our Passover meal, and now we're going to grab whatever we grab, and we're going to go. What would be the thing you absolutely would pack to take with you? And just type it into the chat box. Oh, wow, we've got multiple poodles here. This is exciting. Linda's poodles and Huxley and my poodles. Excellent. Your daughter's adoption papers. Yes. A good pair of shoes, a cell phone. Boy, they could have used a cell phone at the Red Sea. Yeah, the dogs are really, the pets are important. Haven't we learned the importance of pets this year? Oh, take your fiance. Good move, Eric. A books of poetry machine. Wonderful. Are those books you wrote or the poetry that you love? Or maybe both? Your grandmother's wedding ring, Jamie. Oh, that's beautiful. Okay. So I think that thinking about what we would take is one way of putting ourselves into the mindset of our ancestors and bringing the wisdom of our ancestors to us. They did not know what was ahead of them. All they knew was that slavery was behind them, and they were done with that. Now we're going to celebrate their willingness to change and be changed. And that's what this season is really about. It's about being willing to change and a willingness to make change. So I wish all of you a wonderful, wonderful Passover that brings you whatever it is you need and the strength to do it. Because I know we're living in tough times. For some of us, they're harder than for others. And we've all got our own little private problems that have complicated this COVID thing in a million different ways. But we've got each other. That's the other thing, is that when they left the house, after they grabbed the stuff and the dog and the cat and the cell phone, they grabbed each other's hands. And we can do that. We can take each other's hands and head off into the dark with Moses. And they're going to be scary times, but that's okay. We've all got each other.